Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Jean-Louis Peyraud. I work at INRAE. I am a special advisor of the scientific director of agriculture and more specialized in size, in charge of livestock production globally and agroecology. And probably we'll discuss after on that. Besides this role at INRAE, so you know INRAE, I presume, it's a National Institute for Agricultural Environment and Food Research. So we cover all the food system. And we have 10,000 people working at INRAE, so it's a big institute now. We have some scientific division on animal genetics, animal physiology, plant genetics, plant physiology, economy, mathematics, and so on. And we have, I think so, it's 13 research centers in France, so in the different regions in France, included French West IDs in Guadeloupe.
In Guadeloupe?
In Guadeloupe, yes.
It's an island that I know very well.
I know, I'm sure.
Okay, question before Cillian come. What does it mean for you, sustainable agriculture and food? What we are talking about when you are talking about sustainable agriculture and food, there is maybe many different definitions. It depends the perspective that you see it.
Yes. For me, the first definition of a sustainable food system is that we provide food for humans and we preserve the resource for the future generation. This is basically the definition for me. So we need to produce healthy food first. So probably with less chemical inputs to some extent. We will come back on this aspect after. And for the next generation, we need to preserve environment. When we come to environment and agri-food system, we have different challenges. I think that one of the most important is greenhouse gas emission, and so climate change, and agriculture is both an emitter, and I think that more or less 30% of greenhouse gas of human activity is linked to the food chain. But agriculture is also a victim of climate change. So we are clearly at the heart of this system. So climate change is a very big issue, and we need to reduce it. And coming to agriculture, for sure, ruminant production is at the forefront. But we have some way to make progress. The second big issue is the biodiversity losses, which is very, very important for the future, notably for adaptation to climate change. So it's a big issue. And the loss of biodiversity is mainly due to the intensive farming system. And if ruminants is a problem considering greenhouse gas, it could be a solution for biodiversity, provided we produce ruminant with permanent grassland. And the last big issue on environment is the quality, the health of the ecosystem. So, for example, excess of nitrogen in Brittany, for example, with green algae. And again, we need to develop agricultural system and food system to preserve the ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. I think that Cillian is going to join us now. Yes, welcome. No. Welcome. Okay, so if I can rephrase what you just said, Jean-Louis, sustainability on agriculture and food is a long-term vision, mainly for protecting the new generation.
Yeah.
So welcome, Cillian. Can you please introduce yourself and introduce your role in your company, Consumer Goods Forum?
Yes, thank you so much for the introduction. Sorry for barging in here like that. My name is Cillian Tveitnes. I am a senior manager at the Consumer Goods Forum. And essentially what I do there is to...
And Aurélie with us now.
There's Aurélie too. So just very quickly then, I represent our 400 members globally, where we work on, well, I'm sure we're going to get into it, but perhaps I'll stop there and give the floor to Aurélie.
So, Aurélie, can you please introduce yourself and tell us what is your role in your company?
Yes, hello everybody. Sorry for being late. So I'm Aurélie Stewart. I'm head of CSR for Elior Group, who is one of the leader in the contracted catering business, serving 4 million guests every day, over 23,000 sites in 5 countries, and with the help of 90,000 employees. And myself, I am a 46 happy food engineer who has dedicated her career, her 20 years of career to food. Food is my passion, let's be clear. And I've worked in various markets and countries. And there you go.
Thank you, Aurélie. The same question that I asked to Jean-Louis for you, Aurélie. Sustainability in agriculture and food, what we are talking about, because I think that sometimes there is different definition about sustainability. I don't know if it's for protecting some interest, I don't know, economic interest or societal interest, I don't know.
Let's not talk about politics here.
No, I'm not talking about politics, but just for the public, explaining what behind this word, what is the reality of sustainability in agriculture and food.
Well, first of all, for me, it's really, we're talking about the same thing, whether it's agriculture or food business or catering, bottom line. One is really feeding the other. It would be totally misleading if we started to sell and market foods on the shelves that are not backed by any strong commitment at the upstream level. In the catering world, sustainability is really intertwined with 3 questions that we ask ourselves every day. Number 1 is, what kind of ingredient do we want to use? What kind of certification, what kind of production means are they coming from? Where do they come from, obviously, also. The second question that we ask ourselves every day is, what do we need to produce the final dishes? We're not going to serve raw carrots just like that. So what kind of energy do we want to use? How much energy do we need to use? How do we train the people that are actually preparing all those foods? And how do we guarantee the same quality of service, whether you come at 11 a.m. or 2 p.m. to have your lunch, while reducing food waste, for instance? So how do we do that? That's one of the questions that is directly linked to sustainability. And the last but not least kind of questions that we ask ourselves every day is, menu-wise. So how much meat are we going to put in our dishes, in our plates? Do we need to have meat in our plates? For whom? Depends on the public we're serving. We're serving kids, elderly people, people at work, all kinds of situations. And how do we want to improve the quality, the nutritional quality, for instance, of the dish, while reducing salt, fat, name it, but at the same time keeping the tastes, which is the absolute criteria that gather people around the table for lunch, which is my market.
So if I understand, and tell me if I'm wrong, it's when I hear you, I think that sustainability is based on traceability as well, quality, and the fact that we can inform the public about the way that the product that we eat is produced, for example.
Yep.
Okay. Can you want to add something?
Oh, I'll just put my counterparts.
Okay, Céliane, can you explain us what is from your point of view, the definition of sustainability in agriculture and food, and what we are talking about, in fact?
Yeah, so first of all, I agree with a lot of what Aurélie mentioned there. And what I would just start by saying is that I think it's an impossibly broad term, because sustainability in food and agriculture captures so much, right? Are we talking about, as you mentioned, Aurélie, are we talking about the nutritional value for consumers? Are we talking about the way consumers consume? Are we talking about food waste, deforestation, all these things? And of course, from our point of view, where, as I represent the Consumer Goods Forum and those members being retailers and manufacturers, what we look at is really, well, where can we have an impact in the value chain? And so those are kind of where we narrow it down to some extent, but it's still very, very broad. So.
Thank you, Cillian. So now we know what is it, sustainable agriculture and food. The question is, okay, it's very important. The question is, what are the market and societal issues, and not political issues? What are the market and societal issues when we talk about sustainability in agriculture and food? From your point of view, Jean-Louis?
So we have some social demand from the society linked to sustainability. Environmental issue, animal welfare issue, for example, so way of production, quality of food, nutritional value. So the food system should evolve in this direction to provide some responses. And for me, one way of progress is food labeling, for example. We can have food label for environment, provided it is a good label. I'm not sure that today it's a good one. Too much focus on greenhouse gas, probably, but it can evolve for sure. We can have label on animal welfare issue. It's not so common actually in Europe, but it will become in the future because the consumer should have the choice between different products. I prefer not eating meat, for example, or eating meat with a good standard of animal welfare, or it's not a matter for me. And the same for environment. So I think it's very important. And finally, I think that the other aspect of sustainability is the market issue. For who we produce, shall we produce in Europe for ourselves, or to export? We need to export because notably in the north of Africa, a lot of people in Morocco, in Algeria, in Tunisia, will be dependent of Europe to survive. So what we can produce for them without adverse effect on our environment, which is a key issue. We need to export, but without destroying our environment or the environment outside. You speak about deforestation, for example.
Yeah.
So, we cannot produce in Europe using deforestation in other parts of the world. We have deforested our country 500 years ago.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure, but we need to eat. So the last point I should mention here is that, especially in France, but somewhere also in Europe, we have some special territories where we need to maintain rural vitality. It's more or less poor zone, not intensive at all. But how people can live in some region, for example, in Big Massif Central, in Alpen region. So we need to develop system, and these people need to win money to continue to live in this region. In this particular case, extensive ruminant production is clearly a key issue.
Okay, thank you, Jean-Louis. Just a technical point, you can hear that we can hear a lot noise from the other room. You have a system for listeners in a better condition. You can scan the QR code that you have here, use your phone, and hear what we are saying in the mic. It will be a way for you to be less disturbed by the noise in the other room. Thanks for your comprehension.
Or learn to read on lips. We can articulate a lot.
So, Aurélie, from your point of view, sustainable agriculture, food, what are the market and societal issues when we talk about sustainability in agriculture and food?
So even though the usage of the word issue is politically correct, I would talk about pain points.
Let's go.
From my perspective, yes, this is really a sector perspective. And number one is data. So I'll feed in what you were saying. We have so many touch points in society. So 4 million guests every single day, kids, grown-ups, young grown-ups, teenagers, elderly people, people in jails. I mean, we have so many touch points. So we have a duty of information. That's something that at Elior we have embraced very earlier on, because we strongly believe, and that goes with what you were saying, that we cannot force people to eat string beans every day. That is not something that we should do, and that's not something that we want to do. What we need to do is offer diversity of choice, and give the thorough information of what composes every single dish in terms of nutrition, in terms of environment. So this goes into what do we call environment, whether we include animal welfare or deforestation or not, or blah, blah, blah. But we need to give to, at the same time, offer diversity. We cannot just forbid, I don't know, French fries, for instance. That's no. So we need to keep that offer very widely open, and we need to have the proper information within our system in order to convey it to you, our guests. So we need to acquire data. That's the key point. And everybody's working on it, but it's still a pain point because we're not done yet. It's the early stages. The second pain point is the price point. How do we convey to our clients and our guests the value of the food that we're serving? Thank you, ma'am. I can see that. Yes, yes, yes. So for us to be able to give and to offer a sustainable dish and menu, of course, we need sustainable ingredient, we need a sustainable agriculture, we need a sustainable process within our own operations, we need people who are paid enough, and we need terms of contract with our clients that are also sustainable in terms of reflecting the value of that food. And right now, as everybody knows, it's complicated.
Yeah, I can imagine. And thanks, Aurélie. And from your point of view, Cillian, regarding the market and societal issues, when we talk about sustainable agriculture and food, what are the main stacks?
Yes, thank you. So just to kind of break those apart and look at the market part first, I'm going to steal your expression of pain points because, of course, when we work with our members who are, the businesses who are, of course, looking to have a profit, but in at least the cases we see with our members, also do the right thing. And the pain point is very often then, well, how can we do the right thing and still remain competitive? And it's not always a zero-sum game, right? If you take food waste, for example, food waste is a massive cost. So it's in businesses' interest to actually reduce all the food waste in their own supply chain. Other elements of this is, we mentioned deforestation earlier, right? It's not often in the business's interest to do this because it looks really bad, right? And we all know what a big issue it is. And to kind of segue from that into what you said about the societal point, one thing we also focus on is human rights issues in the supply chain. And because you mentioned societal issues, as us, as the consumers, what do we care about when we eat the food that we see in the store, right? But what there's also sometimes a lack of awareness about is how is this food sourced? And it's not visible to us what happens, in Indonesia or in Malaysia, whether it's palm oil or soy or etc. And so this is something that a lot of our members are very much focused on in addressing those societal issues down the supply chain.
Thank you, Cillian. We explained what is sustainability in agriculture and food. We explain also the different stacks for the market and for the society. Okay, we have the definition, we have the concept, but concretely, do you have some example that you've seen in terms of sustainability in agriculture of food? Can you give us some example, please, Aurélie?
Two. I can give two of them, if I may.
You can.
Number one, so I'm more downstream. Okay, I'm a caterer. I'm not in the food industry anymore. I'm more in the catering business. So my focus as a CSR director is in catering business is really downstream. So the two examples are downstream. Number one is that we have contributed to the ADEME study on environmental labeling 18 months ago, which study was meant to scientifically compare different methodology and different labels that carry a score, environmental scoring, okay? Nobody's saying that they have the right one. It's very humble. It's the early stages, and we have contributed because we have a direct access to consumers, to guests, as a platform of experimentation. So in our canteens, we have exposed one of the many labels that were meant to be tested. And so number one objective of that study was to actually see if that was possible, to include within our system, our really daily system, that kind of information. So yes, it's possible. Number two was to carry on an analysis of, does that information trigger any behavior change? If you know whether your steak has an environmental score of D, for example, and your vegetarian dish has an environmental score of A, for example, well, will you change your choice knowing that? I'm not saying that you should, I'm just saying we need to know whether this or that information triggers a change of behavior, because bottom line, that's the goal. We need to have the proper system in order to transition our habits. So that was number one. And then, so the fact that as an ecosystem and it was not only in Elior, I'm not saying it's strictly my company, it was a coalition of actors that came together under the auspice of the ADEME and the public services, saying, well, we need to know a little bit better. We need to understand better what triggers, our choices. So that was very satisfying to be a part of that adventure, and it's not over yet. We don't have the final results, what will be decided. And my second example is again around, you're going to say I'm talking about only this, but about a vegetarian offer. I joined Elior in 2016. At that time, so it's not that long ago, that time vegetarian offer was, a nice to have in an offer, for happy fews, some B&I company that would like to have a special treat for their employees. That was 2016. Now it's mandatory. Now it's not. It was a nice to have, and now it's a must. In every single offer we deliver, there is a veggie corner. So that I think is a good news. It's going mainstream. This, but along many other sustainable offers. I mean, I'm focusing on vegetarian, but it's just an illustration of how sustainable offer is going mainstream.
Thank you. Thank you.
Opinion.
Thank you, Aurélie. Thanks for that. And Jean-Louis, what is your opinion regarding, not your opinion, but what kind of example do you have for illustrating the sustainability in agriculture and food?
Okay, so I just mentioned at the beginning the labeling of food. So environmental label is one part. We can discuss a lot about environmental label. No problem. No, it's not the subject today, but we can discuss on this. I think that in the past or recent past, we discovered that agriculture produce some negative impact to the environment. Greenhouse gas, green algae in Brittany, and pesticides in other parts and so on. So farmers try to do effort to reduce, but we realize that it is not enough. It is not enough because they have not the financial capability to change. We can have some help for the public policies, but less and less money again.
Yeah.
So for me, one way of progress, apart labeling, is the environmental and social employment of industry and cooperative. Yeah. Because this approach has different advantages. The first one is that we integrate, by definition, the entire food chain from the field to the plate, or to the food at least. After, the consumer has its own role. The second is that downstream players have much more financial support and capability to drive all the system to help farmers and to develop their own process in factories. And it's private sector, but also cooperative. So I think it's very important. And the last point, and not least, is that with this approach, we involve a very significant part of the production. When farmers do effort, sometimes it's for local market. It's label food. PDO cheese, for example, but it's very pleasant, but it's small volume. Using social and environmental responsibility of firms, we drive 1,000 farmers together in the same time, in the same way. So I think it's for this is very important. After another example, so I think a lot of sectors now are involved in this approach, and really I think it will be a strong tool. But without social and environmental responsibility, just to mention that some cooperative, I don't know the name. I know the name, but we don't.
You can, if you want.
So
no
it's
problem.
Coopel. Just because pig industry is very under debate for animal welfare and environmental issue. And they did a huge effort without RSE, indeed. And they developed a system to produce pig without castration, without antibiotics, so production level. And after, they developed an approach of industrial ecology to treat all manure and all waste from the slaughterhouses, and they produce pure water, they produce energy for themselves and for the city, which is just
close to the
yes,
field.
for Lamballe. So part of Lamballe is eat thanks to the pig production, and they produce a lot of byproducts, including with animal manure fertilizer, which has export in 50 different countries. And it will be very important in the future because we know that the price of mineral fertilizer is increasing, and this kind of treatment of manure has probably a good perspective for the future. So this is two examples.
Thank you, Jean-Louis, for this example. Same question for Cillian, but what I can say regarding what you expose, Aurélie and Jean-Louis, the fact that to follow the sustainability in agriculture and food demand a lot of infrastructures, a lot of investments. So the question, maybe it will be easier to address from rich countries, I would say, North countries, rather than the countries from the South. It will be perhaps, as if you have an answer regarding my remarks, I take it.
I do not politics.
No, it's not a politics. It's just a concrete reality.
It's my vision as researcher. I think that in the Nordic country, in North country, Europe and America, we go too far in intensification of the farming system, both for cereal production and for animal production. So we need to change the system. In the South, the problem is different. They don't produce enough, so they need to produce more. And it is our responsibility to help them to produce what they need in a more agroecological manner and not using industry as we have, inputs industry as we have used in Europe 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Is it the case? I had a question.
It's quite complicated. There is for example, in Africa, in some country in Africa, we have big debates between different visions. We have a vision of industrial farming coming from China and America, and we have a vision from more agroecological processes coming from Europe. Okay. So it's different vision. I'm convinced that agroecology will be better for this country because basically African farmers are agroecologists, but it will be difficult.
Okay, thanks for your answer. Cillian, regarding the example of the reality of sustainability in agriculture and food, what kind of example can you give us?
Yeah, so the best example that we see probably comes out of the impacts of our coalitions of action. These are 8 separate coalitions. I'm not going to bore you with going into the details, but essentially our members are focusing on separate issues where, well, it's about measuring the impact. So the first thing that we do really across the board is that we look at, well, how can we even have the data, right? So how can we, you need to be able to measure something to even have a target and then to see the impact. But that's quite broad, so I'll give you some more concrete examples. When it comes to, for example, food waste, we see that a lot of our members, through our initiatives, are engaging in whole crop purchases, essentially to make sure to engage with farmers and collectives to ensure that there's to reduce food loss on the farm. And perhaps you'd be surprised that how much of the food is already lost post-harvest, right? It's mostly post-harvest, and then it's at the consumer level and a little bit less in between. And perhaps to also challenge a bit the point here in terms of whether we need to produce more. Perhaps it's a time to use the slideshow here. That's just been in the back. I'm just going to jump past some of these. These are, by the way, the coalitions I'm mentioning. Not all are about food, but they're linked directly or indirectly. But if I just jump across here, first of all, right, we see that 40% of all food globally is wasted. So I mean, there's enough food. It's more about how do we avoid losing it across the value chain. And of course, the question is, well, where is it lost? Because it depends if you're in Europe or if you're in Africa, right? And so I love this particular slide because it says a lot. If you just look here, first of all, at the lower axis, you see the region as it's divided into. And on the x-axis, you see, well, where is the food lost, right? And the interesting thing just to look at is the trend of, well, consumption has way higher losses in quote-unquote developed world, while production has much higher losses in a percentage sense in less developed countries. So that's going on for a while, but I thought it was important to bring that out. And just if I can take a very quick other example completely unrelated to this, and I'm going to jump a bit ahead again, is in terms of forest positive, our forest positive coalition. And what we see there as a very concrete example of improvement, both in terms of deforestation, but also in terms of the human rights issues that I mentioned earlier, is that our members, so these companies, they do not own or operate farms themselves, but we are working very closely both with traders and farmers in these countries where we see issues of deforestation and human rights. And we also work very closely with the governments in those countries. So I think that the key point to take away here is that we're trying to apply the pressure of the industry because these are global value chains, right? But yeah, you can't do it alone, and you need to have that cross-stakeholder collaboration. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you, Céliane. So thanks to you, we understood what sustainability in agriculture and food means. So thank you. We understood also what was the stacks regarding this concept. We understood also through your examples what we have to do in terms of responsibility, in terms of investment, in terms of, I would say, new way to think the way that we produce food. My last question will be about the future. Even though we told about a little bit about it, if we want to prepare for the future, what will be your recommendations to achieve the criteria that qualify agriculture and food as sustainable? From your point of view, Aurélie.
Well, I'm going to repeat myself.
But
data,
it's good for
data,
education.
and data.
Data.
We need
Yes,
data.
you're right.
Data,
You're right.
sorry.
Yes, for my French accent. Sorry for that.
No, it's British. No, I'd say so. Number one is really gathering data, and to do that, we need to support the work of the scientists who are working on it, who are working on detailing the different kinds of criteria, on qualifying databases. So we need to support that. We need to be able to integrate those data in our systems, and to do that, we need tools. And that's where innovation kicks in. Some tools do not exist yet. How to make our system cooperate with, we have thousands of different suppliers. How do we make their system cooperate with ours? That really does not really exist yet. I mean, there's not one only solution to do that. So my feeling is that really, so supporting science, gaining more knowledge and developing data culture within our companies in order, once we get that data, once we have the proper tools, that it doesn't stay cold and that the data, comes to life and that we can use it properly and offer it to our guests. But in order to get that to our guests, we need to have all the data. We cannot, I mean, to have environmental scoring on one dish, in average, we count between 10 and 15 ingredients for one dish. So we need to have all the information on all those 10 to 15 ingredients in order to have the proper scoring. If we're missing one, the scoring will be misleading. So we need to have everything. We can rely on hypothesis, but then we need to be clear with our guests whether the scoring is backed on some hypothesis and rounding numbers. But we need to be very clear, and to do that, we need to have a data culture within our company. So that number one. Number two, I just have three. Just
as you like.
Number two, I wanted to refer to my outcry to get more flexibility on contracts with our clients. And I think that one way to do that, and it goes with what you were both saying, is to work to forget a little bit about the linear approach of a supply chain, but function into ecosystem and have an ecosystem approach, a really system approach, coalition, cooperation. I heard those words, and there are many topics as for us, animal welfare and food waste, for instance. We are much more performance. We reach more performance by going into those issues with our sometimes competitors, but we sit around the table together because we have the same suppliers, for instance. We have the same kind of process, and so if we gather all our minds together to tackle those issues, those common issues, that's much more effective. So yes, coalition, absolutely. Collective approach, absolutely. And the last one is more personal, but I'll just say it. I really believe that regulation and regulatory constraints are good and can fuel transition. Of course, maybe some of you who are French know EGalim. Yeah. No.
Can you explain?
EGalim is a regulation that stated 2 years ago that public canteens would offer 50% of quality, or 20% of organic, up to 50% qualitative food, quote unquote. No more plastics in 2025. Well, really a whole lot of constraints, really. But that, at the end of the day, the spirit of that law really made us move the needle. It helped us move the needle. It helped us have a new conversation with our clients, and our clients to have a new conversation with us. So, yeah, my last point would be, well, hello, regulation, welcome.
The last but not the least, see, if I rephrase what you said, the 3 key points is first, innovation, through the data. Let me finish. Through the data, and the data is a way to improve the innovation as well. Second is a collective approach, if I understood. And the third part, very important for beginning to enter in a sustainability ecosystem, is regulation at the same time for maybe create new habits in the public. I would say. Okay. So
very well. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Aurélie. Jean-Louis, your opinion regarding and your recommendation to achieve the criteria that qualify agriculture and or food as sustainable.
Okay, so I will stress on not directly on data and collaboration, but I will just give an example using these two
Three.
measures. Yes. The first is at the agricultural sector level, we need to develop much more agroecology.
Okay.
This is a key point because our systems are no sustainable. Too much intensive animal production in some place, too much cereal without livestock in other place. So we need to reconnect both livestock and crop sectors to maintain soil fertility, to provide protein autonomy for livestock, and to reduce pesticides. So we have an experiment in France showing that it is a mixed circular economy, circular ecosystem, circular economy between livestock and crop. and to avoid waste, circular agriculture to avoid waste. In France, for example, for cereal production, we produce, apart cereal, 12 million tons of byproducts.
Okay.
And these byproducts can be used only by animals or to produce energy. So it's a political choice after to manage between the two. Actually, we have 3 million tons for energy and 9 million tons for animals. We need to remember that on Earth, photosynthesis, the most important carbohydrate produced by photosynthesis is cellulose.
Okay.
And cellulose can only be used by animals and normally livestock. The price behind is methane. But
Okay.
so we need to keep a good balance, probably slightly less animals than one we have today, but a good balance between animals and crop. So this is the first point. The second point is what technology can bring us to solve this problem. So I don't come back to data because it's crucial and it was explained just before. But concerning technology, we need also to think about genetics, plant genetics, animal genetics for the future. We need also to think about what type of plant and animal phenotype we need for the future. Can we build this phenotype thanks to genetics, thanks to epigenetics, thanks to microbiota? So biotechnology will be a key issue. And the last point is the development of digital technology, robotics, to simplify the work of farmers. And artificial intelligence. Just an example, with artificial intelligence and camera, we can detect some problem on animals before the farmers. So we will avoid antibiotics, for example, and we will improve animal welfare. So I think that digital is important. And digital is also important because it ensures traceability along the food chain, from the field to the food.
To the plate.
Yes, to the plate, to the fruit.
Yes.
Yeah, I said to the food because after the food and the plate, there is a consumer, but we can use digital technology for consumer as well. Okay.
I have an additional question regarding one point that you evoked. It's about genetic. Because, you know, this word creates some fantasy in the brain of public. How you can explain to the public, for professional as well, that genetic could be the future of sustainability, because it could be things as a contradiction between nature and genetic.
Okay.
Because we are talking about the future.
Humanity practiced genetics since the beginning of farming system.
Yes.
So we need to continue. After is the tool we will use to make genetics. But today, especially in West Europe, we have too much specialized varieties of plants, too much specialized animals. Taking one cow in France, putting this cow in another situation, it will be very difficult to survive. Taking one varieties of wheat we have here, putting in Africa, we cannot produce anymore. So we need to improve robustness and adaptability of our varieties and animals. This is an example. After, we can discuss about the tool. It's genomic selection, which is used now since several years, both in plant and in animals. Shall we use NBTs? So it's a question. I'm not sure it's very useful. We don't know. As a researcher, I said we cannot suppress this technique before trying to use it, at least at research level.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for this clarification. Very important for the public. You want to add something, Aurélie? Yes.
In terms, I'm not a scientist at all, but in terms of genetics, even before, so I won't even talk about change of genetics or exploring or tests or whatever. What I can say is that today, with our eating habits that I can see every day with my stats and the data I receive, again data, it's that we don't even use the amazing variety and diversity of genetics that is under our own nose. We are only eating, 80% of the fish that we eat are on 3 species.
Yeah.
There are thousands of them existing today.
Yeah, yes.
And we're just not using them. So, genetics, it's also giving transitioning means also exploring the genetic, natural genetic diversity that is today existing and that we are not exploring today.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Aurélie. From your point of view, Cillian, if we want to prepare for the future, what would be your recommendations to achieve the criteria that qualify agriculture or food as sustainable?
So, first of all, I think it's a very high bar to actually make sure that all our food is both environmentally and socially sustainable throughout the value chain. It's a very high bar. So I think the first point there is to start with awareness when it comes to consumer level, but also businesses. Other than that, I just want to say, well, I actually really agree with everything that has been said. And if you hadn't mentioned it already, Aurélie, I also would have said data or being able to really measure throughout your value chain what you're actually looking to improve. So that's a major part of it. And then technology, of course, will be a massive lever to reach that goal. But what I wanted to also really stress there, and what I see among our members who are the most active in this field, is that we can't also just wait for the solutions to come, right? We need to look at, well, okay, we can't do everything today, but what is it that we can do? And that also links to the point on regulations, right? Because most of our active members, they know that regulations are actually going to come. So either way, you should implement today what you anticipate will come. And then you can also be a kind of best practice case for the rest of the industry to help scale up. Right? I mean, we have 400 members, but and these are massive global companies. But if we're looking at the whole world of the industry, of course, it's still best practice cases that we're looking to highlight and to share to get everyone else involved. So I think that's, from our point of view, adding to the data and the regulations is also to show what can already be done and how can we move and nudge the rest of the industry with us in partnership with scientists and with governments.
Thanks a lot, Cillian. Thanks a lot, Aurélie. Thanks a lot, Jean-Louis, to have explained us what is sustainability in food and agriculture, and to give us concretely some example of how the science, how the industry and companies, how some non-governmental organizations, could help to go to this objective. We hope that this interview, this roundtable was at the level of your expectations, and thank you for your attention.